Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see all of you here again in this platform. And this is the final meeting of our short course on the Catholic Church and Interreligious Dialogue. And we will be discussing something quite different and crucial for the sustainability of interreligious dialogue. That is the role of the youth in this kind of enterprise or activity of the church. We have been talking last week about dialogue, about love of God and love of neighbor as the two pillars on which we can meet together, Muslims and Christians, most specifically. And there have been debates about that, but our take on it was very positive, largely last week, and I'm happy to hear that kind of response from us in Asia, because the document, as we discussed last week, has been received differently in different parts of the world. And today we are trying to understand the dynamics of love that is very concrete. It's not theory. When it comes to theology, even theology of love can be very divisive, can be very, heated debate around that can be very disheartening, right? People debate about that. Theologians are fighting against each other on certain level, right? So it's hard sometimes to come to a kind of unified understanding of what love of God entails, for example, last week, right? So today we are going not to talk about the meaning of love, theology of love, but rather the action around love, how love actually works in interfaith dialogue through the role of the youth in particular. I think this would be the nice ending to our course as we move forward, especially in Asia. Asia is a youthful continent, right? We are talking about India and we pray for India, but India is also very young subcontinent or country. A lot of young people are there, also in Korea, I suppose, but not Japan. Perhaps Japan is a little bit of anomaly in Asia, but Indonesia is, of course, experiencing this demographic bonus. There are more young people than we need here in the country. So I hope our discussion is more stimulating and more hopeful for the future of our church here in Asia, a very youthful part of the world. So I have sent you the reading for tonight, and I will just explain some of the gist, the ideas, basic ideas, important ideas contained in the journal article written by, I think, two people. One is my own friend, Jael Natalio from the Philippines, very young scholar himself, involved in this kind of research on the role of young people, a sociologist by training, but also is delving into this interreligious dialogue themes and topics in his research. Participation of youth is crucial for the sustainability and I would say efficacy of interfaith dialogue. Without the role of the youth, I think there is something wrong, fundamentally wrong in the enterprise activities of interreligious dialogue in the church and the world at large. Again, young people will affect the future, but not just the future, but even our contemporary world is shaped by young people to a large degree. So interfaith dialogue can only be sustainable if young people, more young people involved in it. For youth, as the article makes it very clear, in the religious dialogue, it's not about theology. It doesn't start with theology, it doesn't end with theology, but rather revolves around person, meeting the real persons, not meeting the religion. They don't discuss religions as abstract categories, set of beliefs, but rather as concrete persons coming from that religious tradition. But they then forge friendship, So friendship is very important, more important than the system, the religious system. And then collective participation in the community, the larger community. So by dialogue, they involve themselves in the betterment of the community. They work for the community, and through that kind of work and involvement, they come together. They get to know each other in friendship through meeting people in person, the other in person, not as abstract category. So interfaith dialogue is a living dialogue then. It's not a theory, it's a living reality. And it's not a document. Unlike last week, our discussion revolved around a document, very visionary, but still it was a document. But this time we talk about real people trying to get together to know each other in the many platforms, dialogue of life, dialogue of cooperation, and it is a living reality. And then it has a power, a real power, according to the article. And the article is based on interviews with people, youth, organizers, those who are really there, those who are really working for the organizations and the community. So these are not interviews with experts, with leaders, adult leaders, or even older leaders of the organizations or churches, but rather young people who are themselves involved in the enterprise of interfaith dialogue on the grassroots level. And the power is very real in terms of changing biases, stereotypes of the religious other, that the Muslims are horrible people, they're evil people. These are the views of common Filipinos against the Muslims coming from the south of the country. But in our different countries in Asia, I think we have the same biases or stereotypes, kind of views against the other. In Indonesia, we view the Muslims, for example, some Muslims as radicals, terrorists, and they consider the Christians as being, coming from middle class kind of society and having this suspect alliance and cooperation with the Vatican, with the power of the West, and so forth and so on, right? But this kind of dialogue helps them to clarify their views of the other, even to put them together in a closer kind of a personal friendship relationship. So this is very effective, according to the article, the power to change and to transform negative views of the other. So the article then argues for the needs of this kind of enterprise to be introduced to the educational system, the classroom setting of education. It doesn't have to end in the larger society, in the communities, but rather the school system, the educational school system needs to be enriched by this kind of same dynamic. So this might also energize us to think along the same kind of direction in the future. We should be inspired. For many of us may be working in this kind of system, educational system, in one way or another. So I hope we can discuss this later. The context that is described in the article is about the religious conflict in our world, and we have discussed this over and over again, so I don't have to repeat this here. In race relation, in particular to the phenomenon of migration, migrant communities, but also the negative thing that came out of that, that is xenophobia, the hatred against the strangers, the people who come from other countries. It's called xenophobic mentality. And it's growing in different parts of the world, in Europe, in America. The sentiment against Asian American in the American society is on the rise now. It's been there, not as intensive maybe and extensive maybe as the hatred against the blacks, but it's very real. People got killed because of that kind of sentiment. So this is the context of our work today. And the article makes it very clear as well that religious tension is not just happening on the global level of politics, but rather in everyday life. The Asian American women who got shot in Atlanta, Georgia, in the States some months ago, were working in what is it called, the parlor kind of business. They're regular citizens, they're regular people. They're not politicians, they're not activists, they're ordinary citizens trying to make a living, right? So the tensions can be there on that level. And the article raises this very old question. Does religion produce conflict? Yes, there are um, many kind of things that are associated with conflicts and religions. But there's also another possibility and potential in religions, that is religion for peace. And this is as real as the power of religion to incite conflicts maybe, or more real for many people. And religion actually creates a space for young people to participate, to engage the problems of the world. So we are not doing away with the power of religion. We are trying to use religions for this kind of peace movement and development of the society. So the article then goes to explain the difference between this kind of perspective, the role of the youth in interfaith dialogue versus the kind of dialogue that has been the norm, so to speak, done by experts, by religious leaders on theology or just ceremony, sometimes signing the documents, very textual, very perhaps high level, but there's a question as how to translate all those values, all those nice documents into reality. Um, Sometimes, if it gets to theology, once again, the debate can be very heated. But there have been some other initiatives, dialogues on gender equality, diversity of human sexuality in the West, mostly, but also in Asia now, and care for the environment, right? And many other issues, very concrete issues. And there is the need for dialogue against exclusivism, of course. And the article also emphasizes the need for the fusion of horizons. Dialogue is needed because we need to be enriched by our encounter with the other. On this point, I think we have been very clear, and we have been very enriched by our the dynamics of this course thus far. So I don't have to go deeper into that point. But moving forward, there is a need to realize that the focus of dialogue is perhaps not theology. Again, if we talk about the youth, then theology might not a good entry point. We need to look for another entry point, that is perhaps friendship, person-to-person encounter, involvement in the larger cause for the community and the world, that kind of social awareness that is higher in the youth even today. So religion, again, here for the youth is not a belief system, but social relationship. It's not about doctrines. It's not primarily about theology, but rather about social relationships. So interfaith dialogue can be understood as a process of forging friendship. This is the gist of the article and the research. What's going on among the members of that organizations in the Philippines. Some of you or all of you have been to the Philippines, maybe? Paul, of course. You would go to the Philippines many times a year, typically, right? And some of us might have been there as well. So it's in Manila, in that kind of context, right? A very densely populated city, metropolis, the great metropolis of Asia, with that kind of problem, drugs, but also poverty, traffic congestion, and many other social ills. but also the power of the people, the resilience, their religiosity, their devotion, and the role of the Catholic Church, but also the presence of the Muslim other minority, but significant minority though. So the research validates, according to the research, interfaith dialogue validates not the beliefs of other religions, unlike last week. Last week, the topic was about the meeting point between Islam and Christianity, or Christianity and Islam with other religions as well, on the theological notions of the love of God and the love of our neighbor. So it kind of validates the beliefs of other, that Islam and Christianity actually teach the same thing with regard to the love of God and the love of neighbor. So it's validation of common beliefs, and then it should lead to dialogue and action and so forth, common action and love. But now what is at stake is not validating of doctrines, but rather validating the persons. You meet real person and you validate her or him as a person who has or who happens to belong to religious other. And then you meet with him or with her face to face, and you are entering into that dynamic of interpersonal relationship. And then you can say whether your friend is meaningful to you on what sense, and you understand him or her on a more deeper or more personal level. So it's not about religion, it's not about organizations, it's not about institution or beliefs, but rather about a real person. That's the entry point, and it needs to be done during the youth. This is the point, and it is very important. Most of the times, dialogues are done by adults, by older people, by leaders of the community, bishops, theologians, and monks, and so forth. It can be too late for most people if it is done later in life. They have to learn to socialize on religious level since their formative years as young adults or even teenagers. The research is, I think, on the teenagers mostly. So because religious conflict, religious fundamentalism has its roots in years of socialization during childhood. So even as a child, people can form certain views of the other. I have a niece, she is now like 10 years old. She goes to a Catholic school, very Catholic, but she harbors this kind of very negative view of the other. She refused to go to public school because it's not a school for me because I'm Catholic. It's a school for Muslims and I'm not Muslims. And during early years of her childhood, like 5 years old, she read about politics, identity politics, and she formed a certain very firm bias against the Muslims. And I'm always wondering why at this kind of early stage of her life, she could form that kind of opinion, strong opinions against the other, because she absorbs the data and news from TV, from adult conversations, and from other sources. So we have to do something during that very formative years of the youth. Interfaith dialogue is part of religious socialization process, once again, not intervention later during adulthood or even much later during old age, maybe. So that's why in Europe as well, there is this kind of initiative on the part of the church. Dialogo, interfaith dialogue, youth in dialogue. This one is in Torino, in the city of Turin in 2020. So this is the group that the article is talking about, very concrete. So the article's strength is that it involves a very concrete organization in very concrete context. So it has some positive kind of features, but it is very contextual. So we need to contextualize that in our own context later. So these are the members. The article says that there are around 20 something active members of the very young organization here. These are the pictures of this organization, Muslim Christian Youth for Peace and Development, MCYPD, in the city of Caloocan in Metro Manila. You can tell which ones are Muslims if they're putting this hijab, but the Muslim guys, boys, might not be apparent here. This organization began in early 2011, and this is important, the story, the founding story. When children of the adults went house to house to invite their neighbors and barkadas, close friends, so it starts with friendship, local friendship, to a meeting and discuss the possibility of interfaith activities. So it originates in the initiatives of young people themselves. They're not being told by elders of the community to do something. They can come up with that kind of realization and the need for friendship. And then, of course, it involves, or it mainly involves grassroots participation. It doesn't invite famous people. It doesn't invite the bishops of Caloocan, who is also quite famous, and or other perhaps Muslim leaders from Mindanao, for example. No, they don't need to do that. They can do many beautiful things just on their own. It is intergenerational. So children of the adults who were already involved in some kind of interreligious dialogue, and then they pass this kind of spirit on to the children. So there is this intergenerational dynamic going on. And it's managed interreligiously. So the leadership is interreligious and by the youth themselves. This is very important. So they can be very creative. They're not under the supervision, so to speak, or dictates of the adults, of the kind of higher level leaders. So they have freedom and space to create, to be creative as young people. And the activities are quite simple. It's on weekly basis on the local level, and just for the benefit of their local community. It doesn't go beyond their local community. Sometimes they would participate in the larger municipality community, for example, but it's not national. And you don't have to be national to be impactful, right? So it starts as a small enterprise and it keeps to be, small, local, but the fruits are so real. Not thousands of people have been changed, but the change is nevertheless quite real. This is the impacts and results. According to the interviewees, those who are really participating in these organizations and their youth themselves, this kind of enterprise, interreligious dialogue on the local level, has been instrumental in humanizing the religion of others, putting a human face to the religion of others. In the case of Muslims, they would have a very human face, a very kind, beautiful human face of Christianity. Christianity, Catholicism in Manila or in the Philippines is not having this kind of horrible face of being a dominant force anymore, but a very gentle, loving kind of human face. And vice versa on the sides of the Muslims in particular, on the sides of the Christians with regard to Muslims, right? So they know the personalities of their friends because they're friends. They're spending times together, knowing each other, and it changed the view of toward others and also changed the attitude toward others. So there's this real transformation of the ways in which they view others. And this is very important. Radicalism and religious fundamentalism can result from this myopic, very narrow view of the others that result from estrangement, from not knowing. Actually, it doesn't start. It doesn't start only from bad faith or from even hatred, but rather just from not knowing, of ignorance on the personal level, because they are strangers to each other. There's no point of contact between them. So, and this is quite important for the youth. Youth everywhere is hungry, is thirsty for friendships, right? For connectivity. So they turn this kind of enterprise interfaith dialogue as a means, as a space to make friends, because youth needs friends. They're exploring different kind of friendships, and they find that interfaith dialogue can be an interesting, exciting place to make friends. And this is happening on the local community, so they would know, it's easier for them. They're poor. They don't go to perhaps later to universities. They forge friendship on the local level. If you belong to upper class group in the society, you might have friends beyond even your nationality, your national boundaries. But these are poor youth who would spend perhaps for the rest of their life in their local community. So perhaps they realize that it's important for them to have friends from the local communities themselves. And interfaith dialogue actually helps them to find friends. So interfaith organizations is not formal, but rather a community of friends. This is what the article finds, and it is very important, very insightful, to turn interfaith organization as a community or into a community of friends. People join, the young, the youth join the organization because their friends were part of it. So it's network of friendship. And perhaps it's more appealing, right? When your friends are there, you might want to join that because the pull of friendship is so strong. You are not convinced by others who don't have personal relationship to you. It's your friends. And it becomes more sustainable because they are there. They join the organizations with stronger bonds of each other. They don't have to advertise that. They do not have to look for others to join for different reasons or just for academic reasons and so forth. That might be short-lived, but rather it's about friendship that can be lasting longer if it is friendship. Through friendship, I think people say forever. Do we have best friends forever, BFFs? We might have, but if it happens in the context of interfaith dialogue, it is better for interfaith dialogue. It is sustainable in the future. Friendship becomes also the main reason for trying to understand the other. This is very important. Friendship becomes the main reason for trying to understand the other. I don't want to understand the other just because they have an exotic or strange religion for that matter. But I want to understand the other because we are friends. And to be friends, you have to understand each other. So friendship actually becomes the method, the way to understand the other religions included. So this is, I think, a better way of knowing, right? In East Asia or in Asia in general, friendship is, applauded as this kind of means to understand each other. And Matteo Ricci, a great missionary who came to China, a Jesuit missionary in the 17th century, I think, or 16th century, late 16th century. When he came to China, he brought this idea of friendship. as the means, as the entry point to dialogue with the Chinese society, the literati, and also people in the palace of the, is it Ming Dynasty or something? So friendship has been part of this enterprise of dialogue all along, actually. But the youth actually lives in that kind of friendship. It's not the idea. Richie didn't start or didn't stop with the idea of friendship either. He has he had many friends, and then his friend, another Jesuit missionary, died of fatigue actually, because he had so many friends in China, and then he had to entertain the friends, to talk with them almost every day. So he died of exhaustion because of friendship. This is rather extreme, but the youth here in Manila and in many other places, in our places too, also have that kind of energy. Where I live here, next door, there's this parish, very youthful, very lively parish. And we have a group of young people every Saturday. They come together and they distribute food, in boxes to poor people. And there are Muslims and Catholic youth people, young people. They come together. They have that kind of energy. They don't talk about theology, but they distribute the food for the poor, and they talk with the poor, and then they come back, and then they make a short reflection every week. Perhaps nothing very deep, mostly, but perhaps it changed the way they see each other. We are good people. We are young. We are doing something, not for ourselves, but for others, and we come together for that. We see each other. We see face to face each other's face every week, right? So it means something for them, I'm sure. And they become non-judgmental about the religions. They know the difference in theology, in sometimes morality, sometimes the Muslim morality that is quote unquote appalling to Christians is their monogamous kind of possibility. Not everyone is polygamous there. I mean polygamous. Their polygamy can be appalling to Christians who uphold this monogamy. But when they see friends who come from that polygamous household, for example, family, they might see the morality of polygamy differently, because they see for real what's going on in polygamous kind of setting, becoming more understanding. And then participation in the community, not just friendship for the sake of friendship, but they do something together for the community. So friendship doesn't stop as friendship, but it morphs into, or it translates into real engagement with the community. So interfaith group then participates in the transformation of the larger community. They have been, involved in this cleanup drive, for example, cleaning the ditches, the wet market, for example, the parts of the community that need cleanup, and the government projects as well. Local youth council, they're invited to this council because the community feels that this group is quite important. And then local youth politics as well. You can actually run for a political position there if you have this basis, if you have friends from your neighbors who belong to different religious groups. Then if you run for politics and you are supported by many different groups in the community, your chance of winning that positions is higher, but also your service to the community will be more grounded. You are supported by the whole community. So actually your involvement in this kind of local community, local interfaith dialogue organizations helps create a more humane, better local politics. those candidates that are supported by these communities would be better candidates because they come from this kind of interfaith dialogue communities, right? Supported not just by one community, but by larger communities. And also, youth is interested in social engagement. This is very important, and it is also confirmed by many different other studies. The report from World Vision. World Vision is a Christian Protestant organization based in the US. And 2 years ago, they made this very important research on the youth on the global level, including in Asia. And regarding the role of the youth and aspiration of the youth, Christian youth in Asia, they found many different interesting data. The relevant ones for us here are their desires to get involved in the larger than life kind of projects and missions. They criticize the church if the church is not visible in social realms, if their church is not actively promoting peace and equality, fight against the poor, fights against injustice, fight against corruption, and so forth and so on. And some of them are very open about their kind of disappointment with church leaders because they're not really visible in this kind of social realm. And they want to get involved. They want to get leadership. They want to be leaders, actually, those young Christians, young Catholics in Asia. So this is very real. If we want to get them involved in our interfaith dialogue, I think if we choose the path of social engagement, social dialogue, participation in the community, it would be better. We would have a better chance to get them involved. Again, we don't start from theory, from theology, or from religious experience. Some weeks ago, when we discussed this, there was also an observation that it is hard to talk about religious experience with others, right? And then they have this action-oriented reflective spirituality. They can talk more and more, deeper and deeper, when it comes to action-oriented kind of projects and activities. And then the organization is very active also in livelihood activities, income generating activities, right? So they do something that helps the families financially, and it is also very possible as a means of dialogue. Later for discussion, these are the questions. What do you think of the role of youth in interfaith dialogue in general? Do you agree with the article, the findings of the article? Does it motivate you to initiate or continue similar work or activities in your context? Or do you have other observations or experience with regard to interreligious dialogue and the youth in different contexts? You might have different experience. But I hope the article provokes us to explore the real possibility of involving the youth in this very important activity of the church, dialoguing with the religious others. All right, and I stop here to allow us for more time to discussion.